Excellent. Wonderful. We will get started. Welcome, everyone, to our event. Welcome, Ambassador Duarte Lopez. I am Nicole Bibbins Sedaca, the Executive Vice President of Freedom House. And in a very few minutes, we will have a chance to watch a short but very moving film called Symphony of Courage. It's a Voice of America documentary that tells the story of the Afghan National Institute of Music and the team that worked to evacuate the students, their families, and the Institute's faculty during a dangerous time of upheaval and Taliban takeover in Afghanistan in 2021. The event that we have this evening is made possible through the generosity of Mark and Sushma Palmer Legacy Fund, which is established by Dr. Sushma Palmer in loving memory of her late husband, former ambassador and Freedom House board member, Mark Palmer. Symphony of Courage also focuses on the story of Farida and Zora Ahmadi, two of the youngest of the talented musicians at the Institute. The music school's director, Dr. Ahmad Sarmast, worked with an international team of philanthropists, politicians, and musicians to facilitate their evacuation. After a brief period of time in Doha, Qatar, the group traveled together to Lisbon, to their new home, where they can perform their music in a free and open democratic society. After the documentary, we've arranged for a panel of speakers to discuss the film and our efforts to help Afghans. The panel will include Dr. Sarmast, the film's director, Beth Mendelson, the Deputy Chief of Mission of the Portuguese Embassy in Washington, Alexandra Bilreiro, and Freedom House experts. We will also hear closing remarks tonight from VOA's Ayesha Tanzeem. Ayesha is the director of VOA's South and Central Asia Division and is the former chief of VOA's Afghanistan and Pakistan Bureau when she was based in Islamabad. At this point, though, before we start our movie, I would love to turn it over and invite the Ambassador of Portugal to the United States, Ambassador Francisco Duarte Lopez, to say a few words to highlight Portugal's absolutely essential role in offering sanctuary to the young Afghans. Ambassador.
Thank you very much. Let me start by thanking Freedom House and yourself, Executive Vice President Nicole Bibbins Sedaca, but also Voice of America, and especially Beth Mendelson, and also recognize here with us today the founder and director of ANIM, Dr. Ahmad Sarmast. Portugal being a frequent host of refugees, be it in the framework of the United Nations, of the UNHCR, but also in the framework of the European Union, or even in ad hoc situations, Portugal and our government were especially touched in recent times by two very worrying situations. First in Afghanistan last year, and more recently in Ukraine. On Ukraine, just to tell you that nowadays we are receiving 50,000 Ukrainians, hoping that, of course, they will be able to come back to their country as soon as possible. And on Afghanistan, the documentary speaks for itself. So let me basically thank you for watching the documentary, and let's keep together in supporting Afghan youth, in supporting Afghan culture, and in supporting Afghan heritage. Thank you again.
Thank you, Ambassador Duarte Lopez. And we extend our thanks to the entire nation of Portugal for the wonderful example it has set in offering a new home to the Afghan National Institute of Music and their refugee musicians. It is what great democracies do, and we're thankful for the model that you've given the world. Now, I will ask my colleagues at Freedom House to start our short film entitled Symphony of Courage.
Music Institute of Portugal. And also we can talk a little bit more about Afghanistan and Freedom House's role in trying to address what's happened in Afghanistan. I am at Freedom House, and my role there is as Afghanistan Coordination Lead. I'm so happy that our panel tonight includes the executive producer and the director of the film, Beth Mendelson. I'm going to give a few words of introduction for each of the panelists, and then we'll get to Q&A. And also, if you have questions for the panel, you can use the Q&A function that should be found along the strip of function keys in your Zoom software. So Beth is an award-winning documentary filmmaker and executive producer at Voice of America. And in fact, her communications career spans 30 years across nonprofit organizations, broadcast media, and the US government, including the White House. Prior to her documentary work at Voice of America, she was their chief of the Afghanistan service for 6 years. She was overseeing television, radio, and web programming in that role. And she was previously an executive producer for major American and European networks, including PBS, CNN, and MSNBC. I want to, rather than go through her impressive career, I want to mention some of the topics that she has made films about, so you get a sense of her wide-ranging interests. Before this film that we saw tonight, her prior film was entitled Turkey Breaking the Silence. She also did a series called After Parkland that talks about the impact of gun violence in America's schools. She's done a couple of different projects related to Boko Haram. She also made A Single Step, which was about how the 4th UN Conference on Women in Beijing was the beginning of a movement embracing change for women and girls. She made a film, AIDS, Living in the Shadows. She also did one that profiled John F. Kennedy, A Legacy Remembered, Immigration, The New Face of America, and A Fateful Harvest was Afghanistan related in that it investigated Afghanistan's opium trade and its challenge to the country's stability. So she has had quite a career and has done quite a bit related to Afghanistan. Dr. Sarmast does not need an introduction now because you just saw him in the film. But let me just tell you that he founded the Institute in 2010, and he is also the director of the Afghanistan National Institute of Music. He is a musician himself. He's a member of a renowned music family. He fled Afghanistan in the 1990s, but following the nation's liberation from Taliban rule after 2001, he returned to Kabul and established the Institute. The Afghan National Institute of Music offers music education, as you saw, both in Afghan and Western classical music to students, regardless of gender, ethnicity, or social backgrounds. One of the things that we want to congratulate Dr. Sarmast for is that he and the Institute are winners of the 2018 Polar Prize. He's also been named Honorary Fellow of the National College of Music in London and has received other international honors. In another point that is a very sobering one, Dr. Sarmast has been the target of 3 assassination attempts and was in fact wounded in a suicide bombing at a peace concert of an Anim ensemble in Kabul in 2014. He received his PhD in music from Monash University in 2005 and a bachelor's and a master's of arts from the Moscow State Conservatory. We're also very happy to have with us the Deputy Chief of Mission of the Embassy of Portugal to the United States, Alexandra Bilrero, and she has been in that position since September 2019, but she has had a 20-year career with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Lisbon. She has served in Lisbon in a variety of interesting roles. She was also the permanent representative of Portugal to the European Union in Brussels and chaired several working groups there. She, in Lisbon, worked as the head of the Africa division. She was also director of the Middle East and Maghreb Countries Department. And her second posting in her career was in Angola as Consul General of Portugal in Luanda, and that's one of the most relevant diplomatic postings in the Portuguese Foreign Service. She has a degree in law from the University of Lisbon and a master's or LLM in European law from the Collège d'Europe in Bruges, Belgium. I'm also pleased that my colleague and dear friend First Asaki, who was born in Afghanistan and is an Afghan native, will be speaking on the panel today. She's the senior program manager for the Afghan Human Rights Coordination Mechanism that we both work on at Freedom House. She started working for the United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan 20 years ago, also co-founded a women's rights NGO in Herat, her hometown of Herat, in the mid-2000s. And she has worked in a number of well-regarded firms and organizations such as the World Bank, USAID, EU, and served in the Afghan Ministry of Foreign Affairs for a couple of years at the level of Director General, Senior Advisor for Afghanistan Peace and Security Affairs. She's also taught at the American University of Afghanistan, where she lost students in the August 2016 terrorist attack. She has been educated both in South Asia at Baluchistan University and in has an executive MBA from Preston University there. But she also has a master's degree from Eastern Mennonite University in Virginia and recently completed her PhD work at the School for Conflict Analysis and Resolution at George Mason University. So we're thrilled to have our own in-house expert on this panel as well. Thank you all for making time today. Let me ask Beth Mendelson the first question. Beth, can you tell us how this story came about, how you heard about the Institute and decided to make a film about it?
Absolutely. First off, thank you, Anne and Freedom House, for hosting this this very important event. We're very much appreciative of that, so thank you. So I, as you mentioned, had been the chief of the Afghan service for 6 years. So Afghanistan has always been on my radar. When Kabul fell in August of last year, I knew the dire circumstances that women, especially young women, were going to be in. I saw a story in the Washington Post about the Afghanistan National Institute of Music and about Dr. Sarmast and about how they were evacuating these music students. And I thought, wow, that is a fantastic story. I need to find out about this. So I got in touch with Dr. Sarmast through his press people, and we started to talk about it. By the time I had gotten to them, they had already airlifted 4 large planes of musicians out of the country. There was one group left, and it was the stars of the film. And you got a chance to see their story. You got to see what happened to them. And we had one day to film them. We only had one day. Their uncle and the girls were there, and we took them to a safe house to film them. We wanted to get their musical instrument. I wanted to, especially for Freshta, to get her a violin that she could play. We went to various safe houses, and we knew that we were taking a lot of risk with doing the story. We knew that they were leaving the next day, but the camera person, which was also difficult to get under the circumstances, everybody had left Afghanistan, but we decided to do the story and to try and do our best to get them. With the limited access, we asked their uncle to use his cell phone to take video of them. So we were able to come up with a story. And when the girls finally made it went to Doha, the cameraman on the ground had filmed it. He filmed a reunion, and he called me and he said, "Beth, I've been doing this for 20 years. I've never had tears in my eyes like I do today." He said it was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. So we knew we had a special story. And I think with Dr. Sarmast and Zora and Farida, it really turned into be a metaphor for all the things that were going on in Afghanistan.
Dr. Sarmast, I think I speak for everyone on the panel to say we're quite honored that you're here today from Australia, where you're traveling, to participate in the panel. And I'd like to ask you if we can get an update on how the music students and the Music Institute is doing right now in Lisbon. You're muted, Dr. Sarmast.
Thank you very much for having me this evening with you in this panel and giving me an opportunity to give an update on the situation of the Afghanistan National Institute of Music in Portugal. Before I give this update, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the people of Portugal for giving us a very, very warm reception. Yesterday was the first anniversary of the arrival of the Afghanistan National Institute of Music in Portugal, the very first anniversary. And last year, well, we've been very, very lucky to receive that asylum and to make sure that every member of the ANIM community is evacuated, resettled, and have an opportunity to hope and to dream once again. The year was a year full of ups and downs. The life of a refugee is not an easy one. In spite of the total support of the government of Portugal that we had, but still we had to go through many challenges, beginning from the registration of the asylum procedures of our group, to finding a temporary accommodation, enrolling the students into Portuguese and then music programs. So after 8 months, the government of Portugal totally supported us during all these procedures. The students been eventually find a permanent home. The first 8 months, we've been staying in a temporary accommodation. An old military hospital turned into a refugee camp for our group. Our students being enrolled in Lisbon Conservatory, temporary, it was not a permanent enrollment. But the government of Portugal, of course, it was very challenging to keep the community together, to keep students together, especially we've been traveling with about 72 minors in the group, and we had to complete the court procedures to make sure that they are not splitted and given to the foster families through all Portugal, but in country they keep staying in a residential care together, they enroll together, and they're able to make music together. After 8 months of hard work and the support of government, eventually a solution has been found. We've been moved from a temporary accommodation we've been staying for 8 months to normal accommodation. Group minor students being split into 3 categories who are living close to each other, and the residential cares hosted by 3 different institutions. Major students, families, they moved into normal apartment, began their living and integration. All students are currently enrolled in Braga Conservatory. We've been moved from Lisbon to Braga, where we're staying currently right now, and this is the temporary, this is the permanent home for the member of the Afghanistan National Institute of Music, as where the real rebuilding of a community began. So every student is currently enrolled back in the music program. We managed to reestablish all our ensemble and orchestras. Since our arrival to Portugal, we are making our musical presence slowly but steadily in Portugal. We managed to play our first gala concert after our flee from Afghanistan in one of the iconic musical hall of the country in Gulbenkian Center, in front of a full house, and the concert has been live broadcasted to Afghanistan. And I'm glad that the Taliban saw that concert, and we send our message to the people of Afghanistan that their kids are safeguarding their musical tradition, and the Afghanistan National Institute of Music became a strong voice, not only of the Afghan musician in exile, but also the voice of Afghan women and Afghan progressive forces. And we're trying our best to serve not only musically to the people of Afghanistan, but also to make sure that the world is aware of the plight of the Afghan people, to make sure that the world knows that Afghanistan is today a silent nation, a country where music is entirely banned, a country where kids are not allowed to learn music, to practice music, to listen to music, and musicians are not allowed to make a living through music. We would like also to let the world know that Afghanistan, once again, is a prison for its women. Women of Afghanistan have been denied rights to education, rights to work, rights to fully participate in the social, political, and cultural life of the country. We hear also that through our music, say to the world that once again in Afghanistan, an ethnic cleansing is taking place, to make sure that the people of the world knows that Taliban did not change at all, in spite of the speculation that was happening in the first few months when the Taliban returned to power, and even before the return of the power of Taliban to power. Today, once again, the Taliban are showing their real face, a face of tyranny, terror, and repression. But I'm very glad that Afghanistan National Institute of Music is alive, breathing, not only breathing, but making its musical impact, not only in Portugal, but we slowly making our presence visible outside of Portugal. We already played a number of concerts in other European cities. We are planning big international tours in the coming years. We've got a number of invitations to perform in other countries. But most importantly, we are together, we are making music together, and we are safeguarding the rich musical heritage of Afghanistan, which is facing a musical genocide inside of the country.
Thank you, Dr. Sarmast. I am so struck by your words about a country where music is not allowed, a country with a rich musical heritage, and now a country facing a musical genocide. This is just such a tragedy on top of the existing tragedies that we follow in Afghanistan. I want to remind our audience that if you have a question for our panelists, please feel free to submit your questions in the Q&A feature. Thank you. Our panelists would love to hear from you. And we will now turn to the Deputy Chief of Mission of the Portuguese Embassy to the United States, Alexandra Bilrero. And we did hear at the top from her boss, the ambassador, but we wanted to ask her to talk a little bit more about Portugal's role as a sanctuary for the music school and the musicians. Alexandra, why did Portugal decide to host the school? What is it about Portugal that makes it, and now Braga, such a good home for the Institute?
Thank you, Anne, and thank you, Freedom House, for having us today. Like you rightly said, Portugal frequently hosts refugees, and so it was very natural for us when we witnessed what was happening in Afghanistan in August last year, we decided at a very high level and very, very soon to host the most vulnerable category of Afghans, the ones that would be the first victims of human rights abuses by the Taliban, such as women, girls, or other people that due to their activities were particularly vulnerable, such as human rights activists, journalists, or artists. And in the case of ANIM, we had already had some contacts with the orchestra because 2 years before, they had performed a huge concert in the Gulbenkian Foundation. So Portugal had already had some contacts with the orchestra. So when we were asked if we could host the orchestra, without hesitation, we said yes. We need to do that. It's our moral duty to do that. And well, a part of ANIM, we decided also to host other category of Afghans. And in total, we accepted around 1,000 Afghan refugees, which for Portuguese capacity is quite a lot, also taking into account that Afghans are not the only nationality of refugees that we are hosting. Thank you.
Indeed, the ambassador mentioned Ukrainians coming also to
Correct.
Portugal.
Correct.
Dr. Sarmast, when you think about people like these Portuguese diplomats who arranged for the Institute to come to Portugal, Yo-Yo Ma, who has been supportive of this effort, and to the point where he's in the film performing with the students and having a wonderful time. And people like the Voice of America team who really wanted to tell your story. How does this make you feel personally, given all the tragedy behind this, but then there are these people who are trying to make a difference? And please turn your microphone on. Thank you.
Once again, it clearly shows and cements my belief that music builds bridges. Music does not recognize boundaries. And in our case, you can see that it was not only musicians who positively responded to our cause, to our needs. It was politicians, it was lawyers, it was philanthropists, it was people of all backgrounds, people of goodwill who have been just extending hands of support, friendship, and solidarity for us. And it was also very interesting to see that back in August, when we've been running against the clock to get our community out of Afghanistan before the presence of international community finishes and the evacuation is finished in Afghanistan, that thanks to the ability and the power of music, even both houses of Senate of the United States supported us. We had on our side Senator Cassidy, but we also had on our side Senator Schumer. It all clearly shows the ability of the music, the power of music, that music cannot recognize boundaries. Music connects people, music builds bridges. That's a wonderful opportunity that all people have been supporting us. And while I'm speaking here, I'll also take this opportunity once again to call to all friends of the Afghanistan National Institute of Music, especially to the government of Portugal, that please now help us to assist students, especially minor students, to reunite with their families. This is the biggest challenge we are currently facing. And we hope that the government of Portugal will enable us to, or let us know, or help us to get the families in the same way that they got us out of Afghanistan on a humanitarian basis, not through the normal office procedure, through a case-by-case reunion of every single student. It's going to take years if we're going to move in that direction, but we all know, and I can see on a daily basis, that how much students need their families. And I'm confident that the reunion of the families would enable them and will further contribute to the well-being of the students. And it will help them to focus more on their music education, on their development. And together, through this procedure, through the reunion of the kids, we will be only not saving more life, but also we will be further contributing to the humanitarian causes that we have there, but also will be contributing to the well-being of these minors who desperately need their parents.
I want to turn now to my colleague Frishta Saki. And as you were speaking, Dr. Sarmast, I realized she also is an Afghan who has family in the United States, in Germany, and also back at home in Herat, Afghanistan. And so we see every day how Afghan families are split up and trying to make it in lots of different places, and the fears and the concerns Afghans have for their family back home in Afghanistan. Frishta, I'd like to ask you to tell us about Freedom House's work to help Afghan human rights defenders, and also the creation of the Afghan Human Rights Coordination Mechanism.
Thank you very much, Anne, for the kind introduction, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm extremely honored to be on this panel with distinguished members who continue to play a vital role in promoting freedom of expression and ensuring equal rights for both Afghan boys and girls musicians. I thank deeply the Portuguese government, Voice of America, Dr. Sarmast, for their untiring efforts to bring to safety the emerging artists who are the true gems in upholding the musical culture of Afghanistan. These young musicians are the new hope and symbols of freedom of expression, and I hope they continue to thrive in their new homes by lighting up the hearts and souls of many Afghans who continue to remain traumatized by the upheavals and protracted conflicts. Taking this opportunity, I would like to shed some light on Afghanistan Human Rights Coordination Mechanism, which I and Anne closely work from the last almost 1 year. This mechanism was established in response to the unpredictable takeover of Afghanistan by Taliban. The mechanism provided a platform for coordination of efforts around rapid responses for protection of human rights defenders, both inside and outside Afghanistan, to share information on policies affecting the human rights situation in the country, and bring together Afghan and international voices to advocate for full respect for the human rights of all in Afghanistan. This mechanism is managed by Freedom House and 4 human rights organizations: Afghanistan Civil Society Forum, Safety and Risk Mitigation Organization, International Federation for Human Rights, and Madri. During this year, along with our partners, we have assessed the needs of human rights defenders, both inside and outside Afghanistan, developed guidelines and manuals for documenting and reporting on human rights violations, offered trainings on physical and digital security, and provided referral services for human rights defenders seeking financial assistance and relocation. Our network is formed by more than 400 national and international civil society organizations and leaders who continue to promote democracy and human rights, who provide protection services, civil society organizations who are reconstituting their work in exile and trying to amplify the voices of those who continue to face persecution, arbitrary arrest and torture, and who want to continue their work both inside the country. During this year, unfortunately, the situation of human rights remained extremely critical inside Afghanistan. We all know that ban on girls' education, crackdown on peaceful associations, lack of employment, and many other rights of people are in grave jeopardy, especially the rights of young girls and women. The situation is bleak for religious and ethnic minorities, and Afghanistan is sliding into the worst humanitarian crisis. As a result, many human rights defenders are fleeing the country and stranding without any clear pathways for resettlement in neighboring countries. This mechanism, alongside several other coalitions, will continue to advocate for a clear, transparent, and functioning pathways for human rights defenders seeking immediate protection outside Afghanistan. We will continue to advocate for more immediate and medium-term financial support for the human rights defenders, and we will engage countries to provide more safety and resettlement opportunities for all Afghans. And we will amplify the voices of those who want to stay in Afghanistan and continue to work towards their basic human rights, with the hope that one day Afghanistan is a safe place for all, especially for young artists and musicians like Farida and Zohrajan. Once again, I would like to thank you all for your untiring support to all human rights community, to democracy promoters, to people who kept igniting the light of music, culture in Afghanistan. And thank you all governments for providing protection to Afghans who need direct or imminent support. And thank you for your attention, and I'm at your service for any question. Thank you, Anne. Back to you.
Thanks, Farishta. I want to turn to Beth and ask, what has been the reception to the documentary since it's been out?
Well, you know, I'm listening to everybody talk. I'm listening to Dr. Sarmast talk about music having no borders. I'm listening to Alexandra talking about, you know, the heartfelt role of Portugal, and I'm listening to the discussion on human rights. And as we talk about all these issues, it's an intersection of so many things that the world really is caring about right now in so many parts of the world. And I think the film really embraces the human spirit and the ability to really overcome horrible situations, because through music and through the hope of music, I think they're able to transcend the horrible things that have been happening with the Taliban in Afghanistan. And I say that as a way of telling you that the film is doing really well. Forums like this are really helping to generate a lot of interest in it. Voice of America has 373 million, I believe, viewers per week, and where the show has been shown on different language services, where we had a screening last night with Meridian and with the Portuguese ambassador at his residence last night. We're building it slowly, but we're finding there's great interest. Every place we go, people are saying, well, have you thought about this? Or what about, taking it there and, look at different venues. So I think the way we're building this and the outreach is really working. And I encourage people, if you have any ideas or if you're interested in a screening, Voice of America is very supportive of this project. We'd love to keep showing it like this. Thank you for the question.
It's time to turn to our audience for their questions and answers. And not surprisingly, there are some Afghans who are living in North America and who want to speak up about the documentary. I'm quite moved because I personally find this documentary just so lovely, and not obviously in terms of the threat, but in terms of the reception to help Farida and Zora and their uncle Juma Ahmadi, and of course the pain they have separating from their grandmother and going to another country, and yet the excitement they have to be going to school and to be learning music. So not surprisingly, a lot of the Q&A function is filled with some of our friends who also say that they cried during the film, that they are very moved by the film. Several people are asking about your plans for the Institute, Dr. Sarmast. Would you set up somewhere else in the world in addition to Portugal? How do you anticipate these students that once they're done with high school, or as we say in the United States, high school, and go, the girls talked about going to the university. Is this going to be something that might be possible for them?
Of course. First of all, I would like to inform you all that the Afghanistan National Institute of Music has been officially registered in Portugal, and we have our status already here. And we hope that in the coming months, we will be beginning our program with a pilot project, establishing the Afghanistan Cultural Center in Braga, which will be focusing on Afghan music and teaching of Afghan music, as well as Afghan languages and Afghan culture. We will be a bit expanding our vision and our mission of using the power of music, not only to transform the life and safeguarding Afghan music, but our experience in Portugal was also very enlightening in terms of how music can help, and music education can help they can help refugees with their integration. So we will be expanding a bit our program, not only to cover music and music education, but also to enable refugees from different backgrounds living in Portugal through our program to help them with their integration, not only to teach them Afghan music and Western classical music, but also to help them with the hardship and challenges that a refugee face here with their integration. So I think that part of our program will also enable us to see if our program can be adapted in other European countries who are also facing a lot of challenges with the millions of refugees, and the refugees are going through a lot of hardship. I always see that refugee or asylum giving to someone as giving people safety and opportunity. But for them to use this safety and opportunity to build their life, they're also facing a lot of challenges. And without extra help and program to help them and to assist them with their integration and with building their life here. I think that music education can play a significant role, and our program can be adapted once we begin it successfully implementing it here to be adapted into other European countries.
Alexandra, can I ask you then, Nicole Bibbins Sedaca, our executive vice president, already mentioned that Portugal is a model for other countries. And I think most Americans who care about Afghan refugees would certainly praise Portugal for taking in the Institute and its the families of the students. Can you tell me, when you, based on your experiences in Brussels, when you look across Europe, what is the receptivity to hosting refugees the way Portugal has hosted the Institute?
Well, at European level, as you know, the European countries in general are also open to hosting refugees, some more than others. And it's true that we have a tradition, Portugal, of being very welcoming and open to our history, our tradition, our culture. So we are very open to hosting refugees. And this is, of course, a decision made by the government of Portugal. We are an autonomous country, but as it has, like you rightly said, and as it has some implications also at European level, we always do it in coordination with our European colleagues. But in well, ultimately, it's always a decision by the government of Portugal. Thank you.
Another question that was raised by the audience is about the safety and security of the families of the students back in Afghanistan. What can you tell us about the extent to which the families are safe, Dr. Sarmast, and how they're doing? And I think you did already touch on a desire to reunite some of these families, but perhaps you could say a couple of words about that again.
Up to until today, the families are safe, and I'm not aware of any family being threatened or threatened, but they had a lot of difficulty and hardship when Taliban began home-to-home search early this year, because all of them had any musical instruments in their homes, and having a musical instruments is a crime according to the Taliban. They reached out to me during those home-to-home searches, and they were asking me what they should do with them, with the musical instrument in their houses. And to the old pain in my heart, that I knew that how hard it was for us to get those musical instruments to Afghanistan. But my advice to them was destroy them, burn them. Make sure that you are not suffering because of the musical instruments. But often the families are asking me the same question: when we will be able to reunite with our kids? We all know that separation of parents from their kids and kids from their parents is very painful. All these families agreed to go through this pain in order to give their kids another opportunity to hope and dream. And now that their kids are safe, the kids are also homesick. Some of the kids are developing depression, being away from their families. And that's why it is a top priority for me. And I hope, and hope that the government of Portugal help and assist us with the reunification of the kids with their families. The longer this procedure will be postponed, it's going to affect the well-being of the students. And therefore, I call once again on everyone, especially to the government of Portugal, please help us to reunite families with their kids, not through normal procedure of case by case, but through a humanitarian assistance, as it's happened with the Afghanistan National Institute of Music itself. And I can also assure you that the government of Qatar, I'm in touch with them, they're standing ready as soon as the government of Portugal agrees to receive the group, to extract the group from Kabul. So let's work together once again to save lives and also to further contribute to the well-being of these kids who are under the protection of the government of Portugal.
Indeed, Qatar was the way station for these students of the Institute, and also has worked with the US government to evacuate people from Afghanistan. And right now, all those activities are at a halt because Qatar's the host for the World Cup. And so we can't do everything at once, but they deserve thanks for having done that. I would like to ask first, what can we do to keep the American public and the broader public to still care about what's going on in Afghanistan? What do you think the mechanism can be doing? What can friends like Beth Mendelson and Alexander Bilrero be doing to try to keep Afghanistan on the radar screen?
Yes, I think one thing which we all agree as a community of supporters of human rights is that the situation in Afghanistan and in the neighboring countries for all Afghans who fled the country is dire. As Dr. Sarmast mentioned, those even who managed to escape the country are facing extreme situations of depression because they are separated from their families. Many Afghans who are in Pakistan and in neighboring countries are at the risk of deportation because of the different immigration policies. We also know that there are many women protesters, human rights defenders who are lacking any kind of financial assistance. So the situation, we all agree, is dire. We also understand that we have invested all as for the last 20 years in Afghanistan. So it was collective gains and collective achievements. And people on this call and people who really care about Afghanistan, they understand that we are at the verge of losing all those achievements. So yes, we can amplify those voices for more support for human rights in Afghanistan, for humanitarian assistance in Afghanistan, especially as the winter is coming. And as you mentioned, many of this, as Dr. Sarmast previously also mentioned, many of the money is kind of not approaching the right target groups or the beneficiaries. So we can amplify the voices, we can ensure that attention, the spotlight on Afghanistan is not fading away. We should continue to raise the voices of people like Farida and Zohra and many human rights defenders who are at the verge of being depressed. So our role is to provide these kind of platforms for raising awareness, for amplifying voices, for ensuring that people do not, in the capitals, do not forget Afghanistan, especially Afghan women and girls who are going to be suffering a lot under this current political environment in Afghanistan. And as Freedom House and many organizations in the last months have been providing financial assistance to the Human Rights Committee, relocation support, and also medium-term support, and are continuing to raise awareness for safe pathways for the resettlement and reintegration of Afghans. They should continue investing their energy and time on these major causes. Thank you, Anne.
Thank you, Farishta. We've gotten towards the end now of our program. I want to encourage Beth Mendelson and Dr. Sarmast and Alexander Bilrero to read some of the Q&A that have come in because you now all have fans who want to support your work, your different work. Beth, in fact, Belkis Ahmadi from the U.S. Institute of Peace is hoping you'll continue to do coverage of what's going on in Afghanistan. You certainly have the background for it. Is it possible that you would do something else, another documentary, or follow through on this in some way?
Well, of course, you could see that. You must see the wheels turning in my head as Dr. Sarmast was talking, because when you're a filmmaker, you're always looking for the next story. But one of the things I wanted to say that that was so interesting for me tonight, and I've spent a lot of time with Dr. Sarmast, is the issue of the parents has come up so often when we screen the film. Everybody has said, what's with the families? What's going to happen with the families? And with Zora and Farida, it's unusual because they have the comfort of their uncle. But I think Dr. Sarmast has made such a passionate case about why it's so important to bring the parents there. And you know, the other thing that I wanted to mention is when we were making this documentary, I think Dr. Sarmast was creating this in real time. As I said, we got the last airlift. We saw them land in Portugal. We saw them go, you know, to the barracks that became their home. Now we see them going to Braga. I mean, they have put together a system really in real time about how they were going to get these students out and how they were going to have them get a musical education. And we were able to screen the film in Portugal. We did the international premiere there. And I mean, it was, I think the whole team from VOA took such pleasure in it, as well as anybody who was involved in this. So yes, I think there's probably more films down the road. And I hope that the NGOs and other philanthropists and people that got involved early on can try to help the cause for what's happened with the students there.
And at this point, we have our final speaker of the evening, and we're so pleased to have Ayesha Tanzeem. Ayesha Tanzeem is the director of Voice of America's South and Central Asia Division. Prior to the November 2021 appointment, her appointment to that job, she was chief of Voice of America's Afghanistan and Pakistan Bureau, based in the city of Islamabad, Pakistan. She was one of the few foreign correspondents that traveled to areas under the control and influence of the Islamic State militant group when it was at the peak of its power in eastern Afghanistan in 2015. Her reporting brought to light tales of harrowing cruelty and suffering, earning her the David Burke Award for Courage in Journalism. She's also been host of 2 VOA current affairs TV shows. And she has lived and worked in 3 continents. She holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in journalism from Georgia State University. I'm so pleased that we have this colleague from VOA to close out our program. Ayesha, over to you.
Thank you very much, Anne. And for us in VOA, this documentary was a no-brainer. Beth knows Afghanistan. She was the chief of Afghan service for a long time, but all of us at VOA and myself as a reporter who's covered Afghanistan for years now, watching the situation unfold, we knew well before the Taliban rolled into Kabul. And in fact, we knew and we reported on it even as negotiations were still ongoing between the US government and the Taliban. We knew that if the Taliban came into power in Afghanistan, there would be no space for women's rights and for freedom of speech and for arts and culture. And even though the Taliban promised that they would allow women to study and work, promises that we all know they've broken since then, we knew that those opportunities would be severely limited, the professions would be severely limited, and they, at least I knew as a reporter, and my fellow reporters in our Afghan service knew, that women in performing arts would have no space in that. So we wanted to make sure, once the Taliban rolled into Kabul, that we strengthened and protected those rights as much as we could from outside. We also wanted to document history in order to remind everyone that Afghanistan pre-Taliban had a nascent opportunity, but an opportunity to allow women to grow, to allow freedom of speech, to allow arts and culture to thrive. And that opportunity was lost under the Taliban. But the most important part is that we are continuing our efforts. Beth's documentary is one of it. We have, as soon as the Taliban rolled into Kabul, we started a 24/7 satellite TV channel in Dari and Pashto that airs in Afghanistan. The Taliban are trying to block us. They've thrown us off local TV channels. They've recently ordered our radio stations in the country off air, but we continue through our medium wave and our short wave from outside the country. And we make sure we include all the voices that have been silenced in Afghanistan. So in our programming, you watch women, you watch artists, you watch comedians, you watch a lot of the people who have escaped Afghanistan since the Taliban came into power. All the voices that have been silenced in Afghanistan now speak on VOA's channels and our airwaves. We are very proud of it. And we plan to continue those efforts. And we know that the Afghans deserve it. We know that the Afghans want it, because they call us in our call-in shows and they tell us how much they like that. So I just want to let you know, I know you asked Beth, whether she wants to make another documentary, and we all want her to make that other documentary. But meanwhile, we are continuing with our efforts to keep those voices alive.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ayesha Tanzeem. Thank you to our partner tonight, Voice of America, in sharing this beautiful film on this touch subject that unfortunately describes a tragedy. Thank you to Alexander Bilrero and the ambassador attending from the Embassy of Portugal. Dr. Sarmast, our hearts go out to you and to everyone involved with the Institute. It's a very moving story, and it's also Institute, but also we wish you continued courage and strength as you continue to do your job. Thanks to our audience, and especially to everyone who wrote in and said such nice things. And also there were additional questions coming at the end that we haven't unfortunately answered, but we are determined to keep working on these issues. And I speak on behalf of my colleague Farishta, my colleague Aliyah, who in a previous life worked with the Institute, and from the US Embassy in Kabul, and with everyone at Freedom House. A great thanks to our panelists and to our audience tonight. Thank you very much. That concludes our program.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.